Hello and welcome back to Trans Voices in Conversation, the podcast where we give insight into the lives and careers of some of the many talented creatives we at TVC have had the pleasure of working with. My name is Misia Butler. I am an actor, writer and producer with TVC, and I will be your host for the series. Yeah, so this episode we are joined by the marvellous Meg McGrady and Robin Simões de Silva. Do you want to introduce yourselves? Meg, go first.
Oh my gosh, hello. My name is Meg McGrady. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a non-binary composer slash performer of musical theatre. Mm-hmm. And that's me.
That's you.
Robin?
On to you.
I'm Robin. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them, and I'm a musician, composer, actor, general performer person. I write musicals and stories and music that has nothing to do with musicals, and that's it.
Sounds great. Amazing. So let's start us off by the most generic question to ask any creative, which is, what got you into performing and composing and the creative industry in the first place, and what made you decide this is what I want to do as a career? Meg, go first.
Okay, I'll go first. Well, I guess it started, my older sister is very influential on me, I should say. She is quite a few years older than me, however, went into acting / performing at a younger age as well. So I grew up kind of surrounded by her, getting my parents into musicals, and then we kind of copying that. So we went to like the kind of stage schooly stuff together, and then she went on to train as an actor, and I just kind of was already hooked on musicals, so kind of followed suit following that. So I ended up going to the Brit School, and in London. I moved from Newcastle originally to come to this lovely city. And from there, I kind of just discovered, or just like my love of performing went from something that was like a passion that I was thinking about pursuing to being something that was, oh yes, this is going to be my career. No turning back now. This is it for life. Composing wise, it kind of happened, like it's very easy to plot performing wise how I got into musicals. I think composing wise, it's more interesting in the fact that I was just doing my GCSE compositions for music. And I was like, wow, I actually really just quite like this. And people keep singing my melodies back at me. So clearly I must be good if they're getting stuck in people's heads. So I guess I'll just keep writing. And it kind of like died down a bit once I went to the Brit School until we had, there was a songwriting term that we did. And I started writing a song from a musical. And then I was like, actually, I'm in London now. I can like start looking into what support there is down here. So I started going to things like MMD, Mercury Musical Development's open mic nights. I ended up applying for and getting onto Book Music and Lyrics, which is a weekly writing course. And basically, I was very lucky that despite being quite young when I was starting, there was quite a community there that was like, oh, hey, we'll support you. We'll get you some, like, we'll teach you what you need to know, so that although I'm still quite young, I'm like, oh no, I get this now. I get how to do the writing.
That's great. And Robin?
I got into performing like first as a musician rather than as an actor when I was about 10, and I'd been writing songs like badly since I was 8. And then at 10, I started learning classical guitar, but I didn't enjoy it for the first year or so because I was just like young and didn't have the attention span.
Yeah.
And then I got a new teacher who, alongside classical guitar, like encouraged me to write more and let me explore other genres in our lessons. And I'd say she was like the predominant reason that I loved music so much. And like anything that brought me that much joy seemed like I should make it into a career. And then in terms of like musical theatre, I was pretty apathetic towards it at first. Like when I was young, and I went to a performing arts high school in Australia, and they had like quite high quality for a high school musical productions each year, and I didn't like the whole like the culture around those. They were very like intense popularity contest atmospheres. And so I just ignored it, and I didn't do any of the school musicals even like if teachers were asking me to audition, I was really against it for some reason. And so I like at that age would have been like, no, I don't like musicals. I don't like musical theatre, even though
That's so difficult to imagine.
Like really,
Yeah.
I know. Like it's worth mentioning that I was really obsessed with Star Kid with you both.
Yes,
Star
of
Kid
course.
musicals since I was like 11, but I just hadn't made the connection that was musical theatre.
You were
I was
literally
like-
you were at a High School Musical and you were like, nah, I'm not going to take part.
I was like, actually, no, though. I just had like a really weird idea of what musicals were, and I decided that Star Kid wasn't that, and anything that I was already into wasn't that, so I didn't like musicals. But then after high school, like throughout that, I'd just been writing songs and doing gigs and busking and stuff, and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Then I finished high school, and I had a year with a lot of time on my hands, and I got into Hamilton, which is like a super basic way of discovering musical theatre. But, you know, I discovered Hamilton and it like challenged my ideas of what I thought a musical was because I was a silly Billy. And then I fell very hard into that cast recording and went like beyond obsession. And then from that, I discovered more and more musicals and just spiraled very quickly into being a huge musical theatre fan and huge theatre fan in the space of like 6 months.
Wow.
And that was how I got like into musical theatre,
Yeah.
and then I just had to move from Australia to England.
Naturally.
Naturally, that's how it
naturally,
goes.
That was what I did next to like find the performance opportunities I didn't have access to back home. And by the time I'd done that and been like, okay, so I like the music stuff, but I also like the theatre stuff, I was like, I've moved countries, so I've committed. So now I have to do it. If I don't, I've really messed up.
Yeah. I feel like there's such a thing actually though, like giving yourself a bit of a stalemate with it, because otherwise it's so easy just to go, this is way too scary. I can't do this. I gotta do something else.
Yeah.
It's also interesting what you said about the cast album. Like, I bet everyone can name the cast album they listened to that got into musical theatre.
Oh, yeah.
For me, it was we would listen to Wicked and Matilda in the car all the time. So I still know all the lyrics to them all off by heart.
Yeah, my mum convinced us all to go see Les Mis the movie, and I may have gotten way too obsessed with that movie. I know it's a bit of a
also,
kind
like,
of
my whole
taboo.
family hates musical theatre, so that was why. Well, like, you know, they say they hate musical theatre.
Yeah.
They just need a change of perspective. But like, that was another thing. Like, my family were never going to get me into it because they all hate it, and they still do. And they have to be like, oh, yeah, our kid's doing that. Such a shame.
Actually, on that note, kind of obviously, Meg, you went to Brit school, and Robin, you moved continents. How did your sort of, I don't know, parents respond to the kind of idea of their children going into the arts industry?
I was quite lucky in the fact that my sister did all the hard work for me. She had like 4 or 5 years of auditioning for drama school, and my parents being like, just give it up. But then she eventually got in and, flourished. And so when it came to me being like, hey, I know Laura moved out when she was like 21, but can I move to London when I'm 16? Is that okay? My mum was very, very anxious about it, but I was very lucky in the fact that Laura basically graduated drama school and moved to London at the exact same time, and we've been living in the same flat ever since.
Aww.
It's a very cute and wholesome story, but but my mum has since come around and been like, oh yeah, that was the right decision. I shouldn't have been worried. But yeah, they were very chill about it, but that's only because Laura did all the hard work first.
Sometimes it's good being the second sibling.
My brother did not do that. He did like international relations and law and wants to be a lawyer and is now 24 and like healthily, steadily employed and making money. And I think they know that I will not be in that situation. So I think because I had already set it up from like age 10 or 11 as something that I wanted to do, and that was the thing. And they had my whole high school life to try and convince me otherwise. And when that didn't work, they were like, I guess we have to accept it. They definitely, naturally will always worry about like money and stuff, but they didn't like actively try and talk me out of it. They just gently suggested, maybe you could just become a doctor instead. Maybe a natural progression is that you instead become a doctor. So yeah, I think by the time I was like, I'm moving, that took the most convincing. I was 17 and I was about to turn 18, and I was like, as soon as I turn 18, I'm going to move countries. And they were like, oh, okay.
Okay.
And that took a lot of convincing. And then when it happened, I think they like knew that I had to for myself. And they were very supportive, yeah.
Oh, it's nice to hear there's some support there for both of you, definitely.
Yeah. Also, I just realised, actually, the person who probably tried to convince me out of it was Laura. She was like, it's difficult, don't do it.
She's like, I've done it, it's not worth it.
You leave drama school unemployed.
Yeah. But like, a lot of my parents' friends went into the creative industry, and I just grew up with them going, don't do it. Please don't do it.
But then we do it anyway.
Yeah, it did not work. So I wanted to talk a bit more about your sort of writing processes as composers and songwriters as well. Meg, you told us earlier, just before we started recording, that you have started in isolation writing a new musical with your sister, right?
So I have 3 musicals. There is The Phase, which I'm writing with Zoe Morris. There is Rosalind, which is just a musical about Rosalind Franklin that doesn't have a title yet. That's just called Rosalind for now, which I'm also writing with Zoe. And then this new one that I'm writing with Laura, which is called Camp In Between. Very, very different to like the previous 2. They're all quite different. The Phase is about gay girls / kids in high school during 2015. And then like the reflection of having come out and like processed all that, looking back on it. But it's also just about, sex education, trans issues. It's still in school. Basically, I got tired of seeing shows about teenagers and not relating to them. So I was like, I'll write a show about teenagers that's actually hopefully relatable to teens of today. Rosalind Franklin is a musical about the Jewish scientists from the 40s who helped discover the structure of DNA, but was completely discredited by the men who discovered it because they stole her data and she never found out, and she never won a Nobel Prize. It's a true tragedy of a story, but also a very hopeful and uplifting one as well. And then Camp In Between, which is the newest one, is about death, kind of. Not really.
Cheery.
It's set in the in-between place between basically we follow these 2 teenagers who have died and basically they wake up in this camp with these like cheery camp counselors being like, you've died, but don't worry, we're going to help you decide where to go now. And basically the whole show is about them deciding whether they and truly believing that they have self-worth and should go to a better place. And there's other characters in there, like there's the bad boy character. It's kind of deep, but also not, because it's set in this like the cheeriest possible setting of like an American like campground where they're just like, don't worry, kids, it's gonna be great.
That sounds really wholesome.
Yeah, it's very nice. But in terms of like the writing process, I mean, it differs depending on show, I think, and hopefully Robin can kind of agree with that. But with working with Zoe, it's always a process of I get lyrics and then write songs. But I think working on Camp In Between is it's pushing me out of my style comfort zone more, and that takes a little bit longer. But it's hopefully coming together. We'll see.
Well, you got a lot of time to work on it.
Exactly, yeah.
And Robin, what about you?
So my kind of main has a life, has a story musical is currently called Works of Art, but might change that name.
I heard the pause there and I was like, oh, what name are you going to say?
Every day a new name.
Yeah.
No, we're just testing new names at the moment.
Yeah.
But it has had a life so far as being called Works of Art. And for me, the writing process, because I have been writing music separate from theatre for most of my life, does start with the music for me, and I write like the music and lyrics on my own. And with Works of Art, I wrote the whole story and all the music and lyrics, and then just kind of dot pointed between for like a year before we actually got the book writer, which It's a bit different from how Meg has done it. I would like to try more collaborative writing, but it's just not been something I've done so far. And yeah, the writing, we all have like a little specific things. Like I won't write lyrics separately. It has to be like the lyrics will come with the music. If I'm like playing some chords, the lyrics have to come like rhythmically from that. Just like is my most comfortable way. I would like feel out of sorts just writing lyrics.
So interesting.
Because for me, they just like have to intertwine with what's happening in the music. Like a lot of rhythmic things in my head, I'm like, this word is happening not because, like this word is happening because of the music, and they'll come out of each other.
Yeah, it's very different to how I write. I've tried writing alone. I think for me, at least, I've struggled to concentrate on both at once. Whereas when I'm working with a lyricist or something, I find it quite nice because it's like, oh, it depends. Like Zoe's very flexible. Me and Zoe's relationship is very much I will get lyrics and tell her if they're wrong or right. I'll be like, no, that's not right. Go rewrite it. No. And then I'll eventually look at the lyrics and go, oh, I can hear the tune, and then write the tune off that. Yeah. Whereas with Laura, it's been so much more rigorous. I will be given lyrics and none of those will change. And we will sit down and rhythmically work out everything and then work together to find the tune and the lyrics. But
crazy.
But I find it so weird as well that you said that you just like, when you were working on works of art, that you just wrote the songs and then didn't have a book for ages.
Yeah, I was just like, I know where this song exists in the story, and I have all the characters and I have the whole plot. I just don't have the dialogue in between. And obviously, when like the book writer came on, Annabelle, she like fiddled with the plot and came up with new plot lines because she's a book writer and could do that. And so then it became more collaborative, but. Yeah, for a long time it was just like, I'm going to write a whole lot of songs and I know where they go. Yeah.
Did you have sort of discussions with her before of the writing of the book and about the structure of things? Because obviously you came up with this whole storyline and structure and things, and you didn't necessarily feel the need to write the book for it. You wanted to give that to someone else.
Yeah, I wrote bits of it. I did write like passages of dialogue that I knew kind of wouldn't be used for my own purpose of being able to envision the story, and I dot pointed a lot, and there were like synopsises for everything, synopses. But yeah, I just like, for me the songs like told all the emotions that I needed, and then there were plots. And yeah, Annabelle and I had heaps of conversations, and I gave her like, initially I was like, here's the synopsis. It's like, these things are flexible. She had all like heaps of her own ideas, and then we changed things accordingly and discussed. Yeah, then she went away and then came back with a draft, and we talked bits in between. But yeah, I guess there was a lot of like separate work because a lot of my work was already done. Yeah. And now like we're still I'm now writing new songs, and for the last Life That It Had at the Turbine Theatre in February, I had written new songs for that. So it wasn't just I wrote a musical and then the book got inserted in. Like, we are now collaborating more because we've cut songs, and now we're writing new songs, and now I'm writing a few new songs with like a deadline of like 2 weeks from now. And
oh, fun.
Yeah, so I think so that has changed. That has like impacted my writing process because it's new for me, but it's nice.
I mean, it's always the case that, stuff is going to change. We're currently doing rewrites for The Phase, which is the project that's furthest along in its like journey. And like we were meant to have before lockdown happened, we were meant to be going to Beam 2020 and then having a workshop, but all of that's been pushed back. But because of that, we're like, oh no, we can't stop with the journey. So you're just going to have the full like brand new version of it done by October. But like, for the last year or so, since we first did the first showing of it, we basically chucked out, we had 10 characters or something, chucked out half of them, and we're like, okay, so how do we rewrite this plot? How do we rewrite all these songs? And then we've done like several iterations of trying out different things, and now we're at the point where we're like, okay, we think we have the plot. There's songs that need to change still, but now it's exciting. It's exciting. It's very exciting. Yeah. Don't worry, Robin, your song isn't gone.
Yeah. It is always amazing seeing how in flux things are up until literally the last moment for most things. And I recently watched, this is slightly irrelevant, but I recently watched A Portrait of a Lady on Fire. and there was a really great quote in it that I think is relevant to basically all works of art, which is sort of, when do we know that it's finished? And they're talking about this portrait, and well, also maybe their relationship, but and the other one goes, at some point we just stop. And I think that's such a kind of, it's a difficult thing to realize, is that you might not ever reach that point of perfection that, at least for myself, when creating things I want.
I feel like talking to composers, like, it's always the way. Like, you hear about shows that, like, even in like previews are still making changes, and the only reason they stop making changes is because opening night happens.
Yeah, because they have to.
Yeah.
And then no more changes can happen ever. And even then, like, shows like Frozen recently cuts like entire songs like a year into being on Broadway. They just cut loads of songs and added some new songs.
Yeah, it's weird. I remember seeing Hadestown in London, and then hearing the cast recording from Broadway and being like, oh, this isn't the same.
Whoa, that changed.
Yeah. So moving on to a bit more kind of performing rather than writing, and let's talk a bit more about the context of TVC, I suppose. When applying for or approaching new roles, or I mean, maybe this, is also useful with writing as well. How much do you find that your identity, whatever part of it, comes into it? And do you find that it's sort of out of your hands whether or not it comes into it?
I think it depends. It depends on the show for me. Like with Writing the Phase, that's about writing about characters who are in high school. Although it's not about my actual high school and what happened, a lot of the elements of certain characters, I'm like, oh, that element, that person, that facet of that character is me, or that character, that character has, I can see myself in that character there. Or there's a song that includes the story of when I first realized that I was gay. There is that discussed in it. But however, it's really interesting because I've been playing the main character up to now, but I'm finally taking a step back from it for the first time and giving it over to someone else, which will be very interesting, I think, because I've obviously put so much of myself in it, but I'm excited to see what someone else will bring to it. I mean, I should also mention Robin plays the older version of the character. I'm using quotation marks because we don't look older, but...
Yes, because I look a solid 14.
I think that's
it was like 6
consistent
years
thing.
difference character-wise. I'm like, we don't quite look that, but that'll do for now.
Yeah.
But it's interesting seeing Robin play that, and like seeing other people take on the characters you've started creating that have elements of you, and then seeing other performers carry that on in their own way, or taking and changing it and making them a character rather than bits of you.
Yeah.
I'd say no, you go.
I think because Meg has talked about it from like a composing perspective, I think from an acting perspective, I think it is often like out of my hands, like how much my identity comes into it. Like if it's a trans role and I know, like it inevitably will come into it because of that. But other times, if it's a cis role or just not a specified gender, because maybe it's something more music based and less acting based, then I think, as much as I go in there not wanting to think about my gender and identity, I will spend a lot of time wondering if like the people on the panel or in the room or whatever are thinking about it. Just in like a little bit of a, it'll always like be there. I will like obsess a bit on what they are seeing when I come into the room and how much my identity comes into it for them. Even if I'm telling myself it's so irrelevant to the role or to my skills, and in that sense, I think it's out of my hands.
100%. I completely agree with that. Like I recently auditioned for something where I was auditioning as a female part, and I was just like, but how do I still show that I'm non-binary but also act? Like for this panel, I need to make clear that I am non-binary, and you need to respect those, like not even boundaries, but understand that coming into this audition. But and also but at the same time, when it comes to picking songs, even for TVC, in terms of me, I often pick guy songs, but I often have to think about, okay, am I going to need to transpose that slightly for my voice, for a counter alto voice? So whenever I'm performing, there's probably some part of me thinking about gender.
Yeah, that actually comes quite nicely into my next question. It's about the musical theatre world and, you know, songs, but also castings within that. Recently, we have seen some controversy surrounding casting within the musical theatre world, as you are both well aware. But what has your experience been working within it, you know, as trans performers, as also non-binary identifying performers, and do you think there's anything that needs to change specifically?
You can go first.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, my experience recently in terms of those unspecified controversies has just been like fighting too hard for the bare minimum.
Yes.
And like often losing. And that's been like with Meg and with you and with Harry and with like TBC. I think that's been our probably shared experience of it recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of what needs to change is like so broad, such a big thing to tackle. Like so many different facets of the industry and of theatre and of the way people think about it need to change for that to happen. I guess like cis people need to like get educated, sure, but also if we had like more trans people in like the head creative seat, then we wouldn't always have to fight so hard to be seen. And obviously there's like additional barriers to trans people getting into those positions of authority in the industry. But if we were there, then we could steer the ship instead of having like a lot of tired performers advocating for themselves and not being heard because everyone they're yelling at is cis and just doesn't want to get it.
Yeah.
I think though, in a way, I do feel like there is a change coming, and maybe it's because I've come into like I've started acting. And when I came out, I was luckily in a very safe place and environment that helped me come to terms with that. But also, my first show that I did was an off West End show called The Sandman. And that was I worked with that group of people. They had been in my high school. And basically, they had known me as someone else. But I started during that production to start asking for they, them pronouns. And everyone was very accommodating and listening, even though I didn't always know what I wanted. So I've came in having quite a good experience, and since then, mostly it's been good. Occasionally, obviously, with recent casting controversies, I've kind of been involved in that in terms of I wrote the letter that was, along with other people, along with TVC, but I started writing this letter and I turned to people like Robin, like TVC, and was like, can you read this? Can you help me edit this? I want to get people to sign this and to have a really well-worded letter that hopefully describes and just lays down some boundaries that I don't think have been laid down yet in terms of what we are looking for, what we need to thrive as actors.
I think we've like outlined what we need, and then it's up to other people to accept that.
And pay us maybe to, teach them. That would be nice instead of just taking all our help for free.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that like we if we are like the only trans person being hired by like a bunch of cis people, then maybe you're getting hired by people who are very understanding, and that's happened, and then other times you're getting hired by people who are very uneducated, and that like demands a lot of guidance and additional labor that we don't sign up for as an actor, but which gets thrust upon us so often as trans actors, and like undoubtedly a lot of other minorities. But yeah, I think it's just we're doing too much extra work, guys.
And I think like people we've been talking about setting up even like a consultancy process, whether that be with, I know Teddy has some ideas, Teddy Lamb, who's another amazing musical theatre writer person. And like we have started developing our own internal inner trans guidelines of this is what we should look for in a rehearsal room, this is what we should look for when casting, and we will talk about that with each other when we see something that's off, which I think is quite good to have that kind of collective, we're banding together, this isn't just one person's voice.
Support networks out there. I think a lot of the time way too much responsibility and pressure gets put on the actors, as you were saying, Robin, to make the biggest change when they don't really, from my experience, have much power within the structures that are out there. And so change has to be done on a more, I suppose, corporate level. The people with the money are the ones that can make the most change. I mean, moving on to something, I suppose, and finally, it's my last question, something that's is a bit of light out of darkness. I wanted to talk to you both about the fact that we're, yes, in turbulent times, and we have been in turbulent times, whether or not there's been, lockdowns and things like that within the industry. But do you have any tips in terms of the way that you've been, enjoying time or trying to spend time
Isolation.
better? Isolation time. Or do you just have any kind of nice anecdotes that you wanted to share to make things seem a bit nicer than they are?
I feel like Meg's nice anecdote of you guys writing a musical in
Yeah.
isolation.
Yeah,
It's been nice. It's like we've been talking about it for ages, and we're like, okay, now that we're actually forced to be together for however many months / weeks we're going to be here, why not, write together, which is quite nice. I've been doing that. I've been doing a lot of D&D. I'm a massive nerd.
Oh, yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons.
I've now joined 2 D&D games.
I have
Previously, I had 0.
I have 3, one of which I Dungeon Master / DM for, and that's been really fun. I've actually played 4 times this week, but that's also just it's actually just very fun because it's also acting, because you get to you're basically playing a character or many characters in the case if you're dungeon mastering, and then so that's been quite fun, just taking on all these different personalities. I've been doing a lot of like rep building as well and listening to new shows. I'm a big new musical fan, so I've just been like hunting down some new shows, looking for some new songs, preparing for once this all ends, I can be like, hey, look at all these new songs I've learned.
Explode with new knowledge.
I think the fact that people have been like sharing more of their new content online because of isolation has been very nice for helping find new musicals and new
100%.
music, because everyone's like, well, no one's going to come out and pay for this. I guess I'm just going to post it online, which is like a really nice perk of this, that we're getting a lot of really like high quality content that we probably wouldn't see otherwise, because people are more willing to post it online and make it accessible while we're all trying to lift each other up. And that's been very nice.
Yeah, I've been enjoying that. Things like Signal Online, Bonfire, just lots of stuff that Adam Lentz is doing mostly, but also like a lot of individual composers as well. Beam obviously happened. Beam, which I was going to be taking part in, but it's a new musical theatre festival. But they basically were like, well, we've had to postpone the whole thing, so why don't we just release everything online that we were going to put up for that? So that was really good. We're actually working on some stuff for my show right now, which Robin will be working on after
Hell
this,
yeah.
I presume.
Exactly. Yeah, like which I will be recording shortly.
But yeah.
Yes.
That's really nice. Thank you so much, both of you, to just the kind of life that comes out of the musical theatre world. And we're all, I think, all the creatives, especially in the theatre and acting industry, are trying to band together as much as possible and support each other, which is really, really nice to hear and see. And it's so lovely to see both of your faces and to hear both of your voices.
And should say, thank you for doing TVC and like getting involved in that and setting up. Where else could I do
pleasure.
it every single time with Robin? I mean, me and Robin are weirdly our relationship is quite close. Like a friendship is like quite closely tied to TVC, because after I did my first workshop at the other Palace the same day as TVC, and Robin was like, come along, I'm doing a show straight after. And I came along and I was like...
and then they stayed to watch, and then we became really good friends.
Yeah.
TVC is just fostering these relationships. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your isolation time.
You
But
too.
also all your
All
recording
day,
times.
every day. Yes.
Great. Bye.
Wonderful. Bye.